Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week, I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect, not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. After stumbling over an estranged or semi-estranged adult child's boundaries, parents sometimes wonder if they should just ask, "What are your boundaries? Please tell me where they are so I can avoid stepping over them." It's a reasonable and well-intentioned thought, but parents are understandably hesitant to do this. They can feel that it's not likely to work, and they're probably right. Chances are your adult child is not trying to keep you off balance by moving the boundary lines. It's just that people don't always know their own boundaries. One big reason for this is that it takes conscious effort and time to figure out your boundaries. It takes work. Think about your boundaries for a moment. I have an exercise in my book, Reconnecting with Your Estranged Adult Child, that asks you to do this. I ask you to think about money. For example, whether and how much and how often you want to give and to whom. Language. That is, how you're willing to be spoken to, and what words will spell an end to a conversation with you. Sharing, meaning who in your circle is allowed to know about your child's estrangement, and to what extent. And contact. For instance, when are you available, and when are you not available to respond to texts or calls? There are many areas of our lives, both significant and trivial, where we can and do maintain boundaries, whether we think about them or not. For example, I don't like to wait more than about 10 minutes for a table in a restaurant. I'd rather go somewhere else where I can be seated sooner. But if I'm with a group that wants to stay and wait longer, I can choose to violate my own boundary. That 10 minutes is not a hard boundary for me. However, I won't go back to a place where I saw a mouse in the dining room. I don't even have to think about it. If someone invites me to a restaurant where I had an experience like that, I'll suggest a different place. But here's the thing. If the person asks about my restaurant preferences ahead of time, I might say, "Oh, let's go for something Asian," or something like that. It doesn't even occur to me to mention mice. This is a trivial example of hidden boundaries. I don't mean to hide this boundary. I only realize it if there's something that bumps up against it. Think of how many boundaries exist in our lives in how many different areas. That's a lot of boundaries to keep track of. Even if we narrow the field and just look at relationships, we'll find, for starters, that we have different boundaries with different people. I'm happy to share a sip of my coffee with my husband, but if a stranger in a coffee shop wants to sip from my cup, that would cross an invisible line that I don't usually have to think about, fortunately. New situations can arise that we're not sure how to deal with. We haven't decided yet where our boundaries are in those cases. If your next-door neighbor were to suggest the two of you open a joint bank account, where do you stand on that? That might be an easy one, but what if you could share a gym membership? What about sharing a mailbox with that neighbor? Each of these presents a question about where your boundaries are. If they've never come up before, you may have to decide on the fly, and you might make a decision that doesn't feel quite right when you think back on it later. So, allow me to make a gentle suggestion when it comes to your estranged adult child. That you give up any notion that your child is holding a list of boundaries known only to her or him, and you just need access to that list. There is no list. Just like you and me, your adult child or children have to feel out their boundaries as they go. They might make decisions on the fly that turn out to be not right for them. And then when you find out, it's like, "Why didn't you tell me?" But of course, they didn't know. What makes it even more complicated is that boundaries can change with our level of comfort, the amount of space in our schedules, and a dozen other moving parts in our lives. Even the way we feel on a given day can affect how firmly we adhere to our own limits. So asking someone where the boundaries are, although you might sometimes get a solid answer, often leaves you empty-handed and both of you a little frustrated. If you do receive an answer that seems firm, here are a couple of points to keep in mind. Number 1, take any stated boundary at face value. Don't second guess or read anything else into it. 2, respect it at all costs. If someone puts an ugly garden ornament in their front yard, you may not like it, but it's on their property, and so they're allowed to put it there. Telling someone their garden gnome gives you nightmares may be true, but it won't improve your relationship if that's what you're looking to do. And 3, view any boundaries expressed as opportunities for connection. Ironically, taking a keep out sign seriously could make it more likely you'll be invited in the future. Perhaps the best way to fill out someone's boundaries if you're not sure where they are is to insert the notion of boundaries into your speech and invite the other person to draw the lines that make them comfortable. Do this only when you're discussing something specific. Don't make boundaries per se the topic of discussion. In other words, don't ask specifically about boundaries, like tell me what your boundaries are. Instead, wait until there's a potential issue and then try, for example, I'm not sure if such and such a thing is welcome, or I don't want to overstep, so please let me know how you feel about, or let me know how comfortable you are with XYZ thing. Referring to your adult child's boundaries around specifics without requiring immediate or perfect clarity will let them know that you respect their right to have limits around the things that you're asking about, and also in general. And by actively respecting your child's boundaries, or at least the idea that they're allowed to have them, along with respecting your own boundaries, by the way, you will nurture your bond with them, no matter where the boundaries turn out to be. Until next time, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.